Good evening. Welcome to the Wednesday, June 30th Town of Islip Planning Board meeting. If you're just joining us and you have not yet identified yourself and you'd like to speak this evening, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen and let us know what application you're here to speak on if you're a member of the community or if you're the applicant. We remind applicants to please keep their presentations to 30 minutes or less and members of the community to 3 minutes or less. We're going to take some items out of order this evening. The first item on the agenda tonight is going to be Golden Chicken, which is item 2. Second item is going to be Spur Drive LLC. Third item will be 1174 Sunrise Associates. Fourth item will be Good Samaritan Hospital Medical Center. And the last item will be Fox Run Estates. Just want to take attendance. I know Mr. Brown cannot join us tonight. Mr. Bruno?
Here.
Ms. Cruz?
Here.
Mr. Frugari?
I'm here.
Mr. Matamore?
Here.
And Mr. Moriarty?
Here.
Great. Barbara, you can hear everybody?
Yes, I can.
Great. Okay, so first item on the agenda, planning board application, public hearing, Roxana Trella, Golden Chicken, PB 2021-022, southwest corner of East Main Street, State Route 27A, and Gibson Street, Bayshore, 164 East Main Street. Applicant requests a planning board special permit for a restaurant in the business district pursuant to 68-257.1I. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Roxanne Trella, Dynamic Expediting Services with offices at 1040 Terry Road, Ronkonkoma, New York. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So our applicant is looking to modify the planning board conditions set forth in 2006-24, wherein a special permit was given for a restaurant and a 100% parking relaxation was also granted. We are now looking to increase the seats to the restaurant to total 37 seats. This is a business district improved with a commercial building. The chicken restaurant has existed in there since 2008, and there was a coffee shop in the tenant space next door. That coffee shop has now vacated their unit, and we're looking to expand into their space.
Thank you. Is there anything further, Ms. Trella?
Nothing further at this time.
Great, thank you. I do not see anyone who has signed up to speak on this application. Did anyone join us later wishes to be heard? Please raise your hand or hit *9 if you're on the phone. Not seeing anyone. I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is located on the corner of Main Street and Gibson Street in downtown Bayshore, and it's improved with a 2-story commercial building with a coffee shop and minor restaurant on the first floor and 3 apartments on the second floor. Tonight, the applicant is looking to expand the existing minor restaurant, taking over the coffee tenant space and creating 1 single restaurant on the ground floor with 37 seats. No changes are proposed to the exterior of the building. All of the alterations will be interior, except for the addition of some screen plantings along the rear of the building. In addition, as Roxanne mentioned, it's going to require a parking relaxation. The application is consistent with applications typically supported by planning in downtown Bayshore, and there is very little change from the previous use of the commercial space, except removing 1 restaurant to expand another one. So based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. Any questions for the applicant? Any questions from Ms. Wozniak? Anything further from the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, just a question.
Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Where is the current garbage located? I have no problem with the application. I think it's a good use. Obviously, it's been in existence for quite a significant amount of time, but the rear of that building tends to be a mess. It's on a busy intersection in downtown Bayshore. It looks to me, and it's not just this particular applicant, so that's the question I'm asking. There appears to be 3 garbage disposal or these garbage containers in a public parking lot back there. And I know it's been going on for a long period of time, but it seems to me if we get a chance to kind of at least put some screen up with respect to one of the garbage that's located, that's actually servicing that particular restaurant. So I guess the question I have for the applicant is, how is garbage currently being disposed? Number one. Number two, back of that building tends to be a mess. And it's a mess for a couple of different reasons. I just drove by literally the other day, going over to the Y in Bayshore, and there's a bunch of garbage cans just thrown in the back, and things, towels and rags and things were being dried out on a railing in the back. And it just tends to be a real eyesore. And I just think that if we have an opportunity to do something, whether it's a buffer, whether it's a setback with respect to whether it's moving the garbage containers off the public parking lot, I mean, how is the applicant handling those issues?
We were advised of those concerns today by the planning department, and I did speak to the tenants. They have agreed to put up some screen plantings along the rear of the building so that we can make sure that the dumpsters are not visible by any means anymore. They were advised that if they were going to keep garbage in the rear area, they could not keep it out. It had to be properly cut up, speaking as to the boxes, have to be properly cut up, disposed of immediately. They can't wait till the end of the night, being that they are in a prime location. So they were advised that they have to keep their area clean. They have to do screen plantings. They have to make sure that the garbage is always in order, and they have agreed to those conditions.
Okay, that's fine. I think that's a significant first step. The question I still have, though, is a larger issue. There appears to be a number of garbage containers back in there, and I don't know if that's public parking lot or town of Islip parking lot, or Kelly, do you have any information?
So in that lot that you're referring to, that's actually it's weird. It's a parking lot that's in the town right of way on Gibson Street. And it looks like not just this business, but other businesses too are kind of keeping their dumpsters because their buildings go up to the property line. So they have no other choice but to keep them in the town right of way. I contacted several divisions trying to figure out kind of who handles, permitting them to be in the town right of way and in the town parking lot. So I kind of drafted the condition for this tenant to be a little bit more vague. That, once we do figure out which division handles that, they would locate their dumpsters kind of at the direction of planning. And put in any enclosure that, we would recommend based on where the town wants them located in that lot.
Just seems an odd, it's a bit of it's not just a bit, it is an eyesore back there. And I know Bayshore, it's right on the main, one of the main east-west roads of Bayshore. I'm not blaming necessarily this tenant. I think it's historical. But the fact that we've got 3 open garbage containers, parked in a public parking lot, servicing multiple businesses, just seems like, just not from a planning perspective, not a wise approach to them. And I just wonder if we could use this application at least to make the correct step here, and then maybe go to those other users and say, look, this applicant, did what it was supposed to do, and we think they should be doing the same. So I'm not going to hold the application up for this, but I think it's something we should be keeping an eye on. It's a significant, as I said, east-west street. Bayshore, I think it's been a significant improvement in that area. This tends to be just, I think, a continuing kind of eyesore on that one. So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Moriarty. Mr. Frugieri?
Yeah, Mr. Moriarty makes a very good point. In reading condition number 8, it looks like we're requiring the applicant to enter into a contract with the town of Islip to permit a dumpster within a town right of way. That contract might serve as an example for other landlords in that area as applications come in, and the terms of those contracts might help us to keep this area cleaner and neater and more controlled.
Further questions from the board? And Ms. Trello, your client is okay with the conditions that Ms. Wozniak?
Yes, I have forwarded the conditions to the tenant and to the owner of the building, and they are both okay with the conditions.
Great. Thank you. If there are no further questions or nothing further from the applicant, I'll ask if there's a motion.
Chairman,
Mr. Frugieri?
I'll make a motion that we close this public hearing and grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions.
It's a motion by Mr. Frugieri to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Application passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Next item on the agenda, site plan modification decision item, Spur Drive LLC, PB 2019-051, intersection of Spur Drive South in Wingenhopog Road, 775 feet east of Freeman Avenue, Islip. Applicant requests a waiver of mitigation fee, which is required in lieu of the installation of curb and sidewalk along Wingenhopog Road, Islip, for the Gracewood Luxury Apartments. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening. I'm not sure if you could hear me or not.
We can, go ahead.
Great. Mark Saglioka with offices at 131 East Main Street, Bayshore. I am the owner and applicant, Spur Drive LLC. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This evening, we are seeking relief of the $18,720 mitigation fee based purely on the considerable cost of improvements that we'll be incurring outside of our normal obligations based on the town code. Gracewood Estates, owned partly by Spur Drive LLC, is a 96-unit apartment project located in Islip that is going through its final stages for its building permit. And in order to fully understand the unusual circumstances of these additional improvements, I would like to elaborate further on our agreed upon improvements on Winnehaupog Road and Juniper Street, which was worked on with Lisa Anderson, several of our easterly neighbors, and myself. So I'm not sure if we could bring that Winnehaupog Juniper up. Yep, that's the Juniper side that we're showing now. It's the same street, but it has two different names, and it's divided by an island in the middle. So the roadway, if we go a little further north on that, the roadway, which is south of Spur Drive, is Winnehaupog Road. Not sure if you can bring that map any further north. I don't know if I see the cutoff point, but if you look at that dotted line there, to the north of that is Winnehaupog Road. Yes, that keeps scrolling down. I'm not sure if the board members could see Winnehaupog, but it's a little further down if you could scroll down. Here it is. So off of Spur Drive, it's called Winnehaupog Road, and then there's an island, and then it's Juniper Street, which comes in off Islip Avenue. So the roadway south of Spur Drive, like I was just saying, is Winnehaupog, and there are a couple of homes on the east side of that street. As you travel south, you will encounter that landscaped island that separates Winnehaupog Road from Juniper Street. On Juniper, there are three homes, also on the east side, if you jump over to Juniper, with the exception of one home that's owned by the Tavellas, which abuts our property on the southwest portion of Juniper. So, yes, so there's three houses along there where the arrow is, and then one right there, which is Maria Tavella's house. So, as per the town recommendation and our own normal course of business, we reached out to and listened to our neighbors' concerns and began working with them on the objections and needs as we went through our change of zone. In doing so, over the course of about 18 months or so, we had several meetings. We gained their confidence by showing them current and past projects, had them speak to some existing tenants and work with them on improvements that were going to enhance their frontage and resolve their individual road issues. Now, the residents on Winnehaupog Road have a roadway that's partially broken asphalt and mostly RCA or stone with some drainage issues. We agreed with those homeowners to correct the drainage issue by putting drainage in and redo the entire roadway from Spur Drive right up to the landscaped island, and that's both sides of the road. Those residents wanted to keep the rural look, so they were adamant about not having curbs and sidewalks. But they did agree to the town of Islip fence that was required along the easterly property line that we have to install. So the residents on Juniper, however, wanted curbs and sidewalks. They insisted also, I don't want to say they insisted, they wanted a new fence installed, which was a broken down stockade to replace. They wanted us to replace that even prior to our approvals, which we were more than happy to do. And then the installation of the town approved fence along the easterly property line, which along with additional landscaping, and their road is going to be partially repaved with new curbs and drainage. There is existing drainage already on Juniper as well. Now, the existing landscaping island that separates the two will be completely removed and redone with new plantings and a sidewalk that would only allow pedestrians to walk from Winnahoppog to Juniper and vice versa. That island, was something, a bone of contention early on with the town, but, they agreed to leave it because I guess at one point cars were going through from Spur Drive to Islip Avenue. It was a cut through area. So all the homeowners there, as we left it, were extremely happy with what we were doing. So in hopes that I explained this properly to the chairman and the board, my request for relief is to show that in round numbers, we are planning on investing about $220,000 or so. And that was pre-COVID pricing. That was done about a year and a half ago, into the town right away, of which about 120 of it is above and beyond what we calculated as our normal town of Islip code obligations, including mitigation fees. We feel that the $18,720 is not really fair and request that we get relief. We do understand that it's a code, and that's why we're here. That's why I'm here this evening. I would like to say that the town's always been fair and equitable with all my projects spanning some 40 years now. And I believe with this application, we met both the needs of the residents and the town of Islip. So with your consideration for relief on this matter, it would be greatly appreciated. If you'd like, I have a photo looking from Spur Drive down, Winnahoppog, a picture's worth 1,000 words. I'm just not sure how to do it on my iPhone, but I could certainly show it to you.
Thank you. We go to a report from Mr. Gonzalez, then we'll come back, and if anyone wants to see the photo, we'll experiment with trying to get you to show it to us. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As Mr. Sanglioka stated, this is an 8-acre parcel zone residence CA that was part of an approved change of zone, minor subdivision and site plan that reconfigured about 5 different parcels from Industrial 1 and 2 to Res CA and Industrial 1 for the proposed Gracewood luxury apartments off of Spur Drive South, and a separate mini storage warehouse facility fronting Freeman Avenue to the west. The site plan and minor subdivision were approved in February of this year with several conditions that related to standard fees, agreements, etc. The applicant, as stated, is before you tonight requesting the waiver of the required mitigation fee that is being assessed in lieu of the installation of curb and sidewalk along the west side of Winnahoppog Road, which this property abuts, totaling $18,700. Mitigation fees were created by the town of Islip as a way for developments to still contribute towards the town for the benefit of the residents if it were deemed that a specific street improvement for the project were not necessary and could be utilized elsewhere. This fee is assessed for commercial and residential projects all throughout the town. The applicant believes that the improvements they are providing on Winnahoppog Road should negate the requirement of this mitigation fee, as it is above the standard requirements of normal development. Although this property has no access to that road, these stipulations were in the change of zone covenants that it was to be improved as a condition of that application. And I have a list of the improvements based on the plans before you that are essentially in the road. It doesn't include some of the fencing and stuff like that Mark had mentioned, because that's on their property or currently before it gets dedicated, but this is really just the pavement work and all that. So 14,500 square feet of paving, about half of that on the east side of the road, 43 linear feet of sidewalk, a ADA compliant ramp, 44 linear feet of curb, catch basin near the intersection of Spur Drive South and Wingham Hop Road, a 10x4 leaching pool near that as well, and about 2,700 square feet of topsoil. These, and I'm sure the construction costs, as Mark had stated, have gone up. And this number does not include a lot of the landscaping and the fencing and other things that he had mentioned that is on the west side. This is strictly for pretty much the pavement and towards the residences. Total about $56,000. And these are Town of Islip bonding costs. Actual construction may be different depending on, private developments. So the board will have to weigh whether these improvements to the road the development does not have access to should eliminate the requirement of the mitigation fee. And as a last comment, Wingham Hop Road is a very unique road. The existing conditions of it, as Mark stated, pretty much gravel, not paved, accesses for a few homes. So a substantial amount of work is being done that is not typical of a normal development. So, in this unique situation, if the board were to waive the fees, it shouldn't set a precedent for any future applications.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Any questions from the board for Ms. Sagliocco or Mr. Gonzalez? Not seeing any.
I would like to see the pictures.
Okay,
Uh-oh.
tell me.
Go downhill from here. Let's see how good your technology skills are.
All right, Tanner, I need your help.
All right, let's see.
I'm on my iPhone.
I have the picture of the dirt road, if that's what you're talking about. If you want me to share my screen. Is that the one you're talking about? Is it this one?
Yes. That's it. Yes, that's the photo. So that's looking from Spur Drive, looking south down Winnahoppog. You can see that's all RCA or bluestone. And then further down, there's just some unraveled pavement. And then in the distance, you'll see a real, like a tree and a pseudo island of landscaping. And, that entire road with all the drainage, and the landscaping it's going to look like a typical road without the curbs and sidewalks. But that's the side where the homeowners wanted to keep the rural look, but we're doing the whole road over.
Thank you. Any further questions? Anything further from the applicant?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Is there a motion? Mr. Bruno?
I'll make a motion.
Oh, I beat you, Brian. I'd make a motion to grant the application to not require the mitigation fees. I think Mr. Sagliocco is doing quite enough work and satisfying the homeowners, which is something that the board is always looking for. And I know I appreciate that. I hope the rest of the board agrees.
It's a motion by Mr. Bruno to grant the application and waive the mitigation fee. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Frugieri. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Chairman. Please enjoy your 4th of July.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, Town Board Application Recommendation Item 1174 Sunrise Associates LLC, CZ 2020-023, northeast corner of Manatee Boulevard and Howells Road, County Route 57, number 111, Bayshore, 111 Howells Road. Applicant requests to change the zone from General Service T District to Business 3 District, and a Town Board special permit for a motor vehicle dealership pursuant to Town Code 68-302F, Site plan modifications may be required as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Mel Gonzalez, MIG Architect, PLLC, 1050 Old Nichols Road, Suite 200, Islandia, New York, 11749. I'm here representing the owners of the property for the subject property on the corner of Manatee Boulevard and Howells Road. What we're proposing to do is currently, the lot is vacant. We had been before the board previously, and the planning department had requested some information with respect to some comments that were addressed in our preliminary site plan. We've complied with those items, and one of the items that were on their, I guess, concern list was with respect to photometrics on the property. What we've done is we actually, the owners had hired a company to provide photometrics of not only our proposed project, but also the adjoining dealership, which is Bright Bay Lincoln, along Manatee Boulevard and Sunrise Highway. We submitted the photometrics to the planning department for their review. And what we proposed was to, actually what we did was we provided two types of photometrics: the current photometrics of the existing light fixtures and what we're proposing on our subject property. And in addition to that, we proposed the photometrics with shielding of the existing light fixtures in order to mitigate any let's say exposure or spread of lighting in the residential neighborhood. In addition to that, there was some landscaping that was requested, which we have provided, as you see, along Manatee Boulevard and Howells Road. We provided arborvitaes, Doug fir, and junipers in a sawtooth pattern between the fence and the property line, and which is a 15-foot buffer actually between the property line and the fence. We also provided that along Manatee as well. In addition to that, we provided street trees in accordance with the Town of Islip requirements. And on the inside of the fenced area of our property, we provided some curbing along the asphalt area, and some landscape areas going to be seeded. The existing curb cut that was along Manatee Boulevard and also Howells Road are being removed. They're going to be closed. And the access to that property will be through the existing parking lot of the Lincoln dealership. So there will be a through lot access on the east side of that subject property. The width of the access will be a double gate, 11.5 feet per gate, totaling a 23-foot wide. And this is really for inventory. The parking is for vehicles inventory stock. It is not for any of the customers or any of the employees. It's strictly for inventory. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. At this point, I'll go to Mr. Colgan for a report, then we'll come back for questions.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This application was previously heard on December 9th last year. The primary concerns raised then were the landscaping, the lighting, and roadway drainage. The applicant submitted a revised site plan, which shows additional landscaping and closes off the Manatee Boulevard curb cut. Any new lighting on the subject property will be required to prevent light trespass. The drainage is reviewed in conjunction with site plan review, which will be required should this application be approved by the board. Staff has further recommended additional plantings along Manatee Boulevard north of the subject site. The staff has discussed these issues with the town engineer. He has suggested that the existing lighting be reviewed by an engineering inspector and require that additional shielding of those lights if necessary based on the results of that inspection. In addition, he requested additional plantings as space permits and opaque fencing behind the front yard landscaping to better mitigate any light glare from the the proposed lights and the existing lights on the existing dealership. If the board is satisfied that the proposed layout and covenants address these concerns, staff recommends that the board grant the application subject to these conditions and the covenants attached in your packets.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr. Gonzalez, I think there are about 4 things that Mr. Colgan had outlined. I just want to make sure that the applicant is okay with those. If you want me to recite them, I think one was the, if needed, additional shielding to lighting will be provided if the town engineer determines it's needed.
Yes, that's acceptable to the client. Yes.
Great. Additional landscaping along Manatee Boulevard in front of the dealership.
Yes, we had discussed that, and the area that Mr. Colgan was referring to was the asphalt strip between the sidewalk and the property line. So that asphalt strip will be removed and planting will be provided. What I would like to point out is it is very difficult to get any sort of irrigation in that area. So if we were to plant something, some sort of hedge planting, we'd like to provide something that's not going to require irrigation. Hopefully we can do that in the fall where it becomes established and it will not be necessary to provide irrigation.
Sounds like you agree in principle that you worked it out with planning in terms of what goes in there.
Okay.
I think there was additional plantings in the grass area for the subject application.
Yes, so you're referring to the inside of the property, correct?
Yes.
So yeah, I think we're amenable to that. We can plant some additional arborvitaes, Doug firs, and junipers if necessary.
Okay, and the last thing I think Mr. Colgan mentioned was the opaque fencing along the site to the satisfaction of the town engineer.
Right, we can discuss that with the town engineer. Initially, we had gone back and forth there was comment as to providing a decorative type of fence, but I think my client is open to providing some sort of opaque fencing along that. And we're referring to Howes and Manatee, am I correct? Or just along Howes?
Mr. Colgan.
I don't believe we got that far with the town engineer. Certainly along Howes, to the extent that he wants it along Manatee. I mean, if it's up to the board, we can leave it up to further discussions with the town engineer.
That's acceptable.
Any further questions from the board? Mr. Colgan, are these conditions in the current CNRs or no? The 4 that I just outlined?
No, some of them were addressed specifically today, so they will be either amended or appended to the current set as reflected by the record.
Okay, so you're okay with approving subject to those 4 additional conditions
Yes.
to being amended or corrected?
Absolutely.
And Mr. Colgan, you're okay with that as well? Okay. That being said, who wants to take on that motion? Mr. Moriarty.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we grant the application subject to the 4 specific additional covenants that need to be added to the covenants and restrictions, and obviously the balance of the CNRs that they previously agreed to.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to grant the application subject to the additional 4 CNRs that we discussed, in addition to the CNRs that are already proposed. Is there a second? Mr. Matamore, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? The application is granted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You all have a very safe and enjoyable holiday weekend.
Thank you, you too.
All right, take care now.
Next item on the agenda, Town Board application, public hearing, Good Samaritan Hospital Medical Center, CZ 2020-021, southwest corner of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A and Beach Drive, West Islip, 1000 Montauk Highway. Applicant requests Town Board approval to construct a 300,000 square foot expansion of a hospital in excess of 35 feet in height, specifically 101 feet, pursuant to Town Code Section 68-185B. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Just confirm you can hear us.
We can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation. At the outset, we would like to ask if the town could share its screen with Dan Winkleman from BHB Engineering, just so we can show our presentation slides while we're talking.
Hogan, looks like, there you go.
Thank you. I'm here with respect to Catholic Health's application for site plan waivers and recommendation of the town board special permit approval for building height in connection with the construction of the 300,000 square foot patient care pavilion expansion to the Good Samaritan Hospital campus, together with associated improvements. With us today, we have Ruth Hennessy, President of Good Samaritan Hospital, who will briefly discuss how this project is essential to provide for health, safety, and welfare for its surrounding communities. Joseph Leocano, the Senior Vice President, Business Development and Planning for Good Samaritan Hospital, who will briefly discuss public outreach and its impact on the application. We also have Kevin Walsh from BHB Engineering, who will explain the site layout and design. Dan Winkleman from BHB Engineering, who will discuss the traffic study that was reviewed and by the STAN, these experts and the DOT over a course of 2 years when it was prepared. And David Workman from BHB Engineering, who will briefly testify concerning the environmental analysis filed with the town. Also seated on camera is Thomas Garrett from my office. He will not be testifying, but I just want to note him because he is on camera. You will hear from the experts later this evening, and each will be on hand along with Chad Nurba from HDR Inc., the project architects, to answer any questions this board may have. As a matter of housekeeping, the affidavit mailing posting was filed on June 23rd with the Town Planning Department. To put this project in context, the proposed addition will be located directly in front or north of the existing Good Samaritan Hospital building's northeast building facade facing Montauk Highway. The building will be generally sited where a portion of the visitor parking lot is presently located. The displaced parking stalls will be relocated as part of a larger parking lot configuration that will be discussed in detail by Mr. Winkleman. The property is a nearly 48 acres and zoned General Service C, which permits the hospital use as of right, and the hospital has been located at this property since 1959. The approvals sought in connection with this development include the permission of the town board to permit a hospital height in excess of 35 feet or 2 stories. This is not a variance, but an approval that the town board has reserved to itself the right to grant based on setbacks provided. The project is compliant with all bulk area requirements of the General Service C zone, and the project provides several hundred parking spaces in excess of the town's parking requirements. The applicant is also seeking site plan waivers from this board, more particularly landscaping requirements, to permit a reduction of the on-site landscaping in the front yard from 4.4% to 3.8%, and a waiver of the requirement of an 8-foot landscape strip between the ambulance parking zone and Beach Drive, as well as the requirement that such area have a 5-foot strip with low maintenance ground cover or a hedge treatment, as well as permission of this board to not provide street trees along Beach Drive proximate to the ambulance parking zone. Such street trees will be provided throughout the balance of the disturbed portions along Beach Lane, as well as the entire Montauk Highway frontage. Besides the landscape waivers, the applicant also requests the board to allow one-way circulation in the ambulance zone and the emergency department drop-off and parking area, and the proposed angled parking in such areas which are permissible at this board's discretion. The patient care pavilion consists of a 75 emergency room department, 16 operating rooms, a central sterile supply and processing department, a floor of utilities, a 36-bed private room inpatient floor, and shell space on the top 2 floors for the future construction of 72 private room inpatient beds. The proposed addition would replace the existing emergency department, operating rooms, and certain inpatient units. Here it is important to note that the areas where services are being relocated from are proposed to be renovated into private patient rooms and storage. Once the pavilion is complete, the hospital will also be able to convert many of the hospital's existing double patient rooms into single patient rooms. Today, the hospital has 437 certified beds, and once the improvements are constructed, it will continue to have 437 certified beds. No additional certified beds are needed as visits to the hospital have been consistent over the last decade. Single bed patient rooms are the state standard and improve patient safety by reducing hospital-acquired infection rates from patients sharing rooms and bathroom facilities. They promote healing by allowing patients to rest by reducing disturbances, and deliver greater privacy by providing a site for private consultations between patients and those attending to them. The project will also involve the relocating of critical health care services and programs into larger, more operationally efficient and modernized environments to relieve existing overcrowding within the hospital, particularly the emergency department and NICU, which are undersized for their current volume. The improvements also harden the hospital's assets by moving its emergency department further away from the areas impacted by Hurricane Sandy's flooding, which threatened the hospital and had it considering evacuating the hospital before the waters receded. Concerning the location of the building, the patient care pavilion was designed to be placed in the maximum distance away from the single-family residences that are located to the west of the hospital to ensure the addition does not cast shadows onto any residents. Good Samaritan will be asking the town board to approve the height of the pavilion, which is 101 feet at the 2 penthouses, while the existing hospital is 114 feet high. The height is permitted to be increased 1 foot for each additional foot the building is set back behind the applicable 100-foot front yard setback to Montauk Highway and 30-foot front yard setback to Beach Drive, as well as the side and rear yard setbacks. Here, the first floor of the addition will be set back approximately 151 feet from Montauk Highway and 53 feet from Beach Drive, while the existing side and rear yard setbacks are being maintained, allowing the maximum height of 109 feet for the pavilion, which the applicant is below. The pavilion is also tiered so that the upper floors are set back further from Montauk Highway and Beach Drive roadway frontages. The architecture and design will be discussed by the applicant. While this application will reduce front yard landscaping, the front yard between the hospital and Montauk Highway will be vegetated with mature trees. Further, the overall portion of the property landscape will be 38.4%, or nearly double the 20% minimum required by code. The waiver relief along Beach Drive is also limited to the area along the ambulance drop-off zone that is for emergency service vehicles only. This area will be framed by landscape barriers to the south and north. As part of this application, the applicant will also retain or enhance the existing buffers between the main hospital building and residents to the west. These pre-existing conditions have existed for decades and new approvals are not required for them. Where possible, however, the applicant will be improving the buffer, particularly the buffer directly west of the radiation oncology department, will be widened to a minimum of 25 feet and improved with landscaping elements designed to provide additional screening from the adjoining residential uses to the west by relocating parking to the north of the buffer. In all areas where new improvements are proposed proximate to the residents to the west of the hospital property, which are limited to parking improvements to the south of the hospital, a buffer in excess of 100 feet or 4 times the 25-foot minimum is provided. The hospital will briefly discuss how these areas will be vegetated in accordance with the discussions with the hospital's neighbors to the west. At this time, I would like to turn this presentation over to Good Samaritan Hospital and call our first witness, Ms. Ruth Hennessy.
I just want to check with our court reporter to make sure she was able to capture everything there. Barbara?
Sure.
Yes, it was a workout.
I can share my testimony with her if that helps.
That would be very helpful. Yeah, and just a reminder to anybody else speaking to speak loudly, clearly, and a little slower so that Barbara can get everything down. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I am Ruth Hennessy, the president of Good Samaritan Hospital, and I will speak slower. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, for your attention this evening in consideration of the modernization program at Good Samaritan Hospital. In our desire to be transparent, we have held over 30 community-based meetings over the past 2.5 years, as well as having numerous conversations with neighbors and community groups to review our operations, strategic plans, and listen to comments and amend our plans where possible. Could you back up one slide, please? Thank you. Good Samaritan is vital to the community. You'll note in the map that's included, the pale yellow area represents the Good Samaritan primary and secondary service area. We are the second leading hospital for inpatient discharges in Suffolk County. We are the second leading hospital for emergency department visits in both Nassau and Suffolk County. We're the only level 2 designated trauma center for adult and pediatrics on the South Shore of Long Island. And we're the only New York State Department of Health and Joint Commission designated comprehensive stroke center on the South Shore of Long Island. Please advance the slide. In addition to serving the needs of the community through healthcare prevention services provided in outpatient, inpatient, subacute, and home care settings, we are a proud sponsor of many groups and activities. Good Samaritan has enjoyed a long history of service to the community through our comprehensive clinical programs, such as the Cancer Institute and Comprehensive Stroke Center. In addition to responsiveness community circumstances, years ago we weathered the storm with Hurricane Sandy that proved to identify new facility needs that are required to provide care in a safe and effective manner during times of natural disaster. Most recently, we rose to the needs of the community with the diagnosis, treatment, and care of those impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. This presented an enormous need for the community. We treated over 3,200 inpatients, provided vital monoclonal antibody treatments for hundreds of outpatients through our emergency department, in addition to serving as a significant resource for testing and vaccination initiatives in our primary and secondary service areas. With that, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Joseph Liacano, who is Good Samaritan Senior Vice President for Business Development and Planning.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Ruth, and thank you to members of the Planning Board for hearing our application. Over the past 2 years, Good Samaritan leadership team has had the opportunity to meet with various community organizations, resident associations, and individually with many of our neighbors. At this point, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank many of those residents who I've had the opportunity to meet with personally at their homes. In some cases, they've invited me into their homes to look at what our facility would look like from their decks and kitchen windows. I thank you very much for that input. The purpose of those meetings was to inform the community with clear, transparent, and accurate information, to hear feedback, comments, and concerns, particularly from nearby residents. Community comments were mainly focused around parking, traffic, and aesthetics. This slide that we see now is an overall slide of the campus stretching from Montauk Highway on the left all the way to the water, the Great South Bay on the right. We were able to illustrate the location of different homes and the impact of the facility project. We were able to overlay Google Maps onto the facility's site plan. Moving from down what we call our West Drive from Montauk Highway, Dan, if you just follow the cursor down to the first buffer, this is where, right there, thank you. So this is where Mr. Anzalone was speaking about. Right there, the homes are very close to the existing West Drive in a parking area. We've relocated that parking area and expanded the buffer with plantings of mature growth trees. I believe they're called 5-inch caliber trees, but they're about 14 to 16 feet in height. As we continue down further, you can see the existing buffer is not disturbed at all. So the buffer that we enjoy now, it remains. Keep going south, Kevin, Dan, please. And we are adding, we are proposing to add some additional parking for our employees, and that additional parking is depicted in the white area over here. That parking will allow employees a place to park, will also allow more convenient and close by parking near the clinical area of the hospital in order for the patients, for the convenience and safety of our patients and visitors. We've taken further steps, back to the parking area, Kevin, Dan. Thank you. We've taken further steps, and I've had the opportunity to meet with a lot of those neighbors along that western border. And because what we want to do is shield or screen that parking area, that new parking area, and the old parking area from view. So we've taken the opportunity, that red line you see there is a tightly packed or a densely planted row of 14 to 16 foot evergreen trees, which will enhance the existing buffer and screen the view from the parking lot. We were able to do the same thing on the eastern side of the hospital. You'll see where the cursor is now is really along the marina and ball fields. And again, we were able to plant, not disturb the existing buffer, but to plant, in addition to that, another tightly packed pod or rows of mature growth evergreen trees. Next slide, please. So this is a view of the proposed building. The first one on the left side is a view from Montauk Highway looking east. That is what we call our West Drive. And on the right side, just move down a little bit, that is a view down what we call our Center Drive from Montauk Highway. That would be the primary access to the emergency room. Where that blue pickup truck is, would be the drop-off area. The truck would go in, make a left, and drop patients off right there at the emergency department, and then park in front of the emergency department. There's no access to the emergency department any longer from Beach Drive. And the emergency department, as you can see, is relocated relocated away from the residential area and ball fields on Beach Drive to the northern end of the campus. You can zoom out, Dan. The building architecture is built on the notion of enhancing patient experience. The glass gallery and the stone base creates a welcoming experience and helps in finding one's destination and enhances the experience of the patient and reduces anxiety. We opted for the stone-based with intentional window slots as it reflects the strong foundation of the hospital, reflective of a modern interpretation as an anchor base, similar to that of the beacon structures on Jones Beach created by Robert Moses. We wanted the patient rooms to be elevated and light in materiality, so we opted for a glass and frit pattern. Improved visibility by the patient will help ease anxiety for hospitalized patients and is reflective of the modern advancement of medicine. The glazing will also help reflect the surrounding area so it becomes less of a pronounced mass, lighter on the eyes than had it been more solid, such as continuing the brick of the existing hospital. Next slide, please. We are going to move to further down. Dan, that would have been, I'm going to move right into John McMurray's. Beautiful. Okay, leading into the planning of the project, we acknowledge the need to address the campus parking concerns. We've had great success with enforcing our patient and visitor policies with our clinical staff and employees and expect that to continue throughout all phases of the construction. As you'll hear from our traffic study overview, we anticipate a reduction of traffic on Beach Drive due to the relocation of the emergency department to the front of the campus, but also the elimination of visitor and staff having the ability to egress onto Beach Drive and enter the emergency department. We've also planned to take, or we will take steps to eliminate access to the employee parking lot by employees from Beach Drive through the nursing home. That was a suggestion that that was made by some local residents, and we're thankful for that. Lastly, during the post-construction phase, the campus parking transformation will result in a convenient patient and visitor focus moving into the future. As you can see from the slide here, the visitor parking is close up near the hospital, and the employee parking or staff parking is located furthest away from the hospital with a shuttle bus provided for the safety and convenience of the staff to get back to work. Doctors parking is also close by the hospital, and parking for the emergency room. Next slide, please. This slide just shows the location of the proposed patient care pavilion and the proposed emergency room relocated from its existing location north to Montauk Highway, essentially. Some highlights there, we've eliminated the entrance to the emergency room from Beach Drive to reduce traffic and relocated or redirected the cars to our center drive. We've also been able to create a new ambulance drop-off area along Beach Drive. That ambulance area is a little bit different than the one we have now to the south, as it'll accommodate 4 more ambulances and also allow the ambulances to do all of their backup and drop-off maneuvers off of Beach Drive without obstructing traffic. We were able to take input from the ambulance crews, from various local departments, and they were very instrumental in designing that ambulance drop-off, and I thank them for that. We've also taken note, and through our many discussions with residents, have heard about emergency vehicles and law enforcement vehicles sometimes in a hurry parking along Beach Drive with their wheels on the curb. So what we've done there, it's a little bit blurry right there, is we were able to create a special restricted parking area for police cars only. Now that area is conveniently located or proximally located to an entrance to the emergency room, which will provide a fast and easy access for police cars, eliminating the need for them to pull up on the curb and block the sidewalk and the traffic. So I'm confident that that parking area will be well utilized. Okay, at this point, I will turn the presentation, I believe, over to Kevin Walsh, our Senior Managing Director for our Civil Engineer VHB.
Thanks, Joe. Good evening, members of the board. What I'm going to do is just kind of briefly, hopefully without repeating too much of what you've heard, walk through the site plan documents just for some visual context for the improvements that are being proposed. Some of the things that have been talked about so far, you may be able to see a little bit more clearly on the engineering plans as we get through them. As you know, the campus extends from Montauk Highway, which is a New York State road, to the Great South Bay, bordered on the east by Beach Drive, across from St. John the Baptist High School, a residential neighborhood, a town park with ball fields and a marina, and on the west by the residential neighborhood that we've been referring to. The current site of the proposed patient care pavilion predominantly consists today of the visitor parking area and the main entrance loop. And we'll point out on this plan as well as the next one, the location of the current emergency department ambulance drop-off area, which is about 1,200 feet south of Montauk Highway on Beach Drive, basically opposite the south end of St. John the Baptist. And you'll see in contrast on the coming slides, the proposed relocation of that facility in just a second. The rest of this sheet basically covers zoning compliance that was discussed in detail by Mr. Anzalone, so I'll skip over that. And I'll also leave the discussion of the parking and site access to Mr. Winkleman, who will follow me in this presentation. You go to the next one here. So here we have the larger scale detail of the site layout, focusing on the patient care pavilion site, which is the subject of this discussion tonight. The patient care pavilion will be an extension off the front or north side of the existing building, generally displacing the existing visitor parking lot, as I mentioned. The proposed building is approximately 337 feet by 248 feet in gross dimensions, 6 stories in height, comprising approximately 300,000 square feet of gross floor area. As part of these improvements, the emergency department is being relocated from the area noted before to the new patient care pavilion addition, with the ambulance bays located along the east side of the new addition, providing 6 dedicated ambulance bays, plus additional separate parking for the police and security vehicles, as Mr. Loicano pointed out. The emergency department general drop-off area is located along the front or north side of the new addition, with one-way circulation from the center access drive, where it provides for drop-off lanes along the front of the building and allows vehicles to continue around the loop to the emergency department parking, where there are 33 total spaces provided. Okay. I'm sorry, stay there for a second, Dan. I apologize, just want to go back for 1 second and point out that the access drive or the driveway that appears to be shown to Beach Drive from the emergency drop-off area there, I just want to point out that that's for fire access only, so as to meet the fire codes for the maneuvering of emergency vehicles that may not be able to make that turn should they have a need to be in that area. That will not be open to the public. It'll be covered with grass pavers or something along those lines. And again, will serve for emergency purposes only. And then I'll just mention also while we're on this slide, that we're maintaining the existing location of the center access drive, which feeds the emergency department drop-off and parking, as well as the newly reconstructed northwest parking lot. It connects to the new drop-off loop at the main entrance, and then it continues to the west road as before. Okay, now we can move on. Very briefly, I just want to depict quickly the grading and drainage improvements that are part of this project. The project provides for the complete reconstruction of the parking and roadways within the project area, including the emergency department and northwest parking lots. And to improve the handling of storm drainage on the site, we're installing approximately 350 shallow concrete leaching galleys, which will store stormwater for the new northwest parking area and the patient care pavilion building while maintaining the required separation to groundwater which is a significant improvement over the current conditions. Okay, next. And last, we'll just take a quick look at the detailed landscape plan, which provides for decorative plantings at the entrance points, provides for the street trees along Montauk Highway in conformance with the site plan regulations. Generally speaking, as Mr. Loicano pointed out, we intend to comply with the town requirements regarding the number and spacing of street trees along the road frontages, including both Montauk and Beach. However, we do plan to work with the planning department and the engineering department regarding clustering some of those additional trees where we can't, as noted before, fit them in areas that are physically limited by, for example, the emergency, the ambulance access and ambulance parking. But we expect to provide the same number of trees that would normally be required. I'll also note that we're using much larger caliper trees than would be typical for new construction, along the lines of 5.5 to 6 inch caliper, whereas 3 to 3.5 inches might be more typical for new construction. Again, we're trying to create that mature look from day one, as opposed to waiting for materials to grow in. The plan provides for full screening of the parking areas from the public roads. It provides for full screening of utilities along Beach Drive. And again, it maintains the buffers along the west property line, along the West Road. And at this point, I will turn it over to Dan Winkleman from our office to discuss the traffic and parking.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Daniel Winkleman, and I'm the Transportation Systems Team Leader at VHB's Long Island office. As mentioned by Mr. Anzalone, I was retained by the applicant to conduct a detailed traffic impact and parking study to evaluate the potential impacts to the transportation system surrounding the site, as well as the adequacy of the off-street parking provided. In doing so, I work very closely with town planning staff, the town's traffic safety division, the town's traffic consultant, LKMA, and the New York State DOT. During the preparation of my study, we had many meetings with these agencies and department, and believe we have developed a very comprehensive plan to manage traffic and access, as well as to ensure that the parking is managed and effectively utilized during and after the project. The limits of my traffic study include looking at the segments of Montauk Highway between Wagstaff Lane and Snedeker Avenue. In addition to that, we also looked at Beach Drive between Montauk Highway and the Marina. Specifically, it included analyses of the intersections of Wagstaff Lane and Barbary Road at Montauk Highway, Secatog Lane at Montauk Highway, the Westerly Site Driveway across from Keith Lane at Montauk Highway, the Easterly Site Driveway and Milligan Lane at Montauk Highway, Beach Drive, Pease Lane at Montauk Highway, and Snedeker Avenue, Pat Drive at Montauk Highway. Due to the unique characteristics of the area and the uses along Beach Drive, traffic volumes can be much different in this area based upon the time of year. Therefore, as part of my study, we looked at both peak summertime conditions and non-summertime conditions. This would ensure that we captured how school, marina, ball fields, and the nearby beaches all influence traffic conditions in the area. Our traffic volumes were collected on a typical weekday during the AM and PM peak commuter periods, as well as on a Saturday during the midday peak periods. Again, these counts were collected during peak summer and non-summertime conditions. We further utilized our automatic traffic volume counters that continuously counted data over a 7-day period on Montauk Highway and on Beach Drive to ensure that we analyze the periods when traffic volumes would be highest. To highlight the improvements associated with the project, there are a number of changes that we proposed in regards to the way the site is accessed. As part of the effort, the goal was to balance the way that traffic accesses the site from 2 driveways on Montauk Highway, as well as the driveways along Beach Drive. Currently, Beach Drive receives much of the traffic generated by the site due to the location of the emergency department and the fact that many employees park in the visitor lot on the south side of the hospital. This is problematic since the St. John's School, Marina, and Our Lady of Consolation site also use this roadway and they generate their own traffic, which often occurs simultaneously with the hospital's peak traffic periods. To help relieve some of the traffic on Beach Drive and to distribute traffic better to the other access driveways on Montauk Highway, in a sense balancing the traffic volumes, the following modifications to the site access were incorporated into the project. The site's egress to the visitor parking lot on the north side of the hospital was eliminated. This reduces traffic to Beach Drive immediately. The site's egress on the main visitor lot on the south side of the campus would also be closed. This would shift exiting traffic to the traffic signal at the westerly driveway instead, thus eliminating exiting traffic onto Beach Drive. It's also understood that some traffic does use Gate Lane as a cut through to get from the hospital to and from the hospital during peak times. The removal of the egress from the south visitor lot will eliminate any traffic going from the hospital and using that cut through. So we'll be improving conditions along Gate Lane as a result of closing that egress. The emergency department access was also relocated from Beach Drive to Montauk Highway, and that's represented by the blue line. The ambulance access, as I discussed earlier, was also relocated further north, which will help conditions along Beach Drive. There'll be less traffic traveling further south now. This will improve emergency response time, and the area will also provide designated parking for authorized vehicles, so traffic congestion along Beach Drive should improve. These improvements will ensure that traffic is much more balanced between all of the site's accesses and that Beach Drive does not receive the bulk of the site's traffic. This would significantly help during peak periods, such as when the St. John's School has its afternoon dismissal, which often coincides with when the hospital has its shift change. Due to the shifts in how traffic will access the site, after the project is completed, minor signal timing modifications are recommended at the intersections of Beach Drive at Montauk Highway and Montauk Highway at the site's westerly access across from Keith Lane. With these signal timing modifications implemented, conditions would be much similar to what would be experienced in the no-build condition, meaning if the project wasn't constructed. It's important that I mention that this project is a modernization project and a right sizing of the hospital. Therefore, significant increases in traffic are not expected. While this is true, in order to provide a very conservative analysis, we did assume that there would be increases in the number of visitors, patients, ED visits, and employees. Even with these conservative assumptions, it's still expected that there would be less than 2 trips added to the roadway network per minute during peak times. These increases would not be expected to significantly impact traffic conditions. In regard to parking, there are significant improvements in plan for the campus to help manage parking, enhance its utilization, and allocate it to specific user groups such as visitors, employees, and physicians. This plan will prioritize the most proximate parking so it's available to the visitors. The visitor parking areas are shown in green on this slide. The 2 primary visitor lots, one on the north side of the hospital and the other on the south side of the hospital, would be gated so that access to them is limited to only visitors and patients, and thus employees would no longer be able to park in them. Separate parking areas have been provided for the emergency department, shown in purple, the physicians shown in blue, and the staff primarily shown in the orange color, and then supplemental areas for yellow, represented by yellow and red. The employees parking in the existing northerly visitor lot is somewhat of a parking issue perception currently. However, there has a vast amount of parking in the most southerly lot that has historically been underutilized. By implementing a series of gates to restrict parking in areas on campus, most specifically in the visitor parking lots, employees will have to park in the most southerly staff lot. These proposed gates, which will help enforce parking and make it so allocated user groups use them, are represented in red. I should note that gates were recently installed on the existing northerly visitor lot to test their effectiveness in managing parking. And based upon my field observations, they have been working very well in regards to shifting employee parking demands to the south end of the campus. Since more employees will park in the south lot, there are plans to enhance the employee bus shuttle service to provide 2 additional bus shelters in the lot. The shelters would be equipped with call boxes to contact security and a shuttle driver if needed. The shuttle service would be very frequent and it would be very convenient for employees to use. In addition to ensuring that there's a good plan in place to manage parking, it's also very important to know if there's adequate parking on campus to accommodate the future parking demands. In order to verify this, VHB performed parking observations of the existing parking demand and did parking projections to understand the amount of additional parking needed. To determine the existing parking demand at the hospital's campus, VHB conducted a parking survey on Thursday, April 19, 2019, pre-COVID, between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. This time period was selected to capture the typical weekday peak parking demands. During this period, the number of parked vehicles was observed and recorded in 30-minute intervals within a number of discrete areas on site, as well as on the roadways surrounding the campus. Based upon our observations, there were 1,494 vehicles parked during peak times, which generally occur between 12:30 and 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Based upon information received from the hospital in regard to the number of new employees, visitors, and patients, it's expected that the proposed project would generate an additional parking demand of 34 stalls. To be conservative, we inflated that number to 50 vehicles. The 50 additional stalls needed to accommodate the project was then added to the existing demand. Based upon our projections, the future parking demand will be approximately 1,544 vehicles. Since the site provides 2,035 stalls, it's estimated that even during peak times, there would be a surplus of 491 parking stalls on site after the project is completed. Based upon the results of the parking analysis, the off-street parking provided will be more than adequate to accommodate the parking demands for the project. It should also be noted that the town code only requires 1,641 parking spaces be provided. Since the project proposes 2,035, the town's parking requirement is exceeded by 394 spaces. In conclusion, it's my professional opinion that the proposed project will provide an adequate amount of parking to accommodate the future needs of the campus, and that there would be no significant impact to traffic conditions within the study area, given the recommended traffic signal timing adjustments are made. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Dave Wortman to talk briefly about the environmental aspects of the project.
Thank you. I just note for Mr. Gary that you're at 30
Hi there,
seconds.
folks. Hopefully you can hear me okay, and I'll be our last presenter. I'm going to try to be very quick. I have just a few very quick points to share with you as we wrap up. My name is David Wortman. I am the Senior Environmental Manager for VHB with offices in Hauppauge. VHB was also retained by Good Samaritan Hospital to prepare a full environmental assessment form, as well as a comprehensive expanded environmental assessment report, or expanded EA, to address key aspects of the project related to environmental impacts. The expanded EA report includes, among other things, a detailed description of the patient care pavilion, the purpose, need, and benefits of the proposed action, traffic and transportation impacts that you just heard in detail about the traffic impact study that was prepared. That was presented within the expanded EA and details the various benefits with respect to beach drive conditions and site parking conditions. The expanded EA also addressed changes in visual conditions and aesthetic character, as well as shadow impacts. And there are detailed renderings of the proposed facility and a shadow study presented within the expanded EA. Given the waterfront location of the campus along the Great South Bay, the expanded EA also addressed issues of flooding and coastal resiliency. And with regard to those topics, I'll just first mention that the hospital's been planning and implementing a variety of infrastructure upgrades and site improvements to address potential flooding and resiliency issues separate and apart from this project. But with a specific regard to this project, key considerations are that the proposed patient care pavilion will be located at the northernmost portion of the campus, furthest from the Great South Bay, from the town marina on Beach Drive to the southeast, and the canals to the southwest between East and West Bay Drives. Also, the patient care pavilion would be located outside of any special flood hazard areas as defined by FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, flood maps, and in fact would be located over 1,000 feet from the limits of the nearest map flood zone. The finished floor elevation of the proposed patient care pavilion would be 11.5 feet above sea level, whereas the base flood elevation of the nearest flood zone, which again is over 1,000 feet away, is only 5 feet above sea level. The patient care pavilion and the associated parking improvements, therefore, would be above 10 feet in elevation, well above that 5-foot base flood elevation for the 100-year flood. With regard to coastal resources, there are tidal wetlands associated with the Great South Bay in the vicinity of the hospital campus, and specifically the nearest mapped tidal wetlands are located, of course, along the shoreline of the bay at the south end of the campus. The proposed patient care pavilion, would be located over 2,000 feet from the marina and over 3,000 feet from the Great South Bay itself. And to put that into perspective, you can see on the figure that's presented, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, or DEC, which has permitting jurisdiction over tidal wetlands and their adjacent areas, they regulate activities within the wetlands and within areas up to 300 feet upland. So as you can see, the patient care pavilion would be located well outside of the regulated areas for the tidal wetlands, and we would not expect any adverse effects upon those resources. Similarly, the proposed parking lot expansion at the southern portion of the campus is expected to occur outside of the regulated adjacent area of the DEC, whereas the proposed parking lot would be located greater than 400 feet from the limits of the nearest tidal wetlands at the Great South Bay. Last, substantial stormwater management improvements are proposed as part of the overall project, such that stormwater runoff would be collected and recharged to the ground on site, thereby also minimizing or eliminating potential associated impacts on these coastal resources. Last, just quickly, as we detailed in the expanded EA report, the proposed projects would be consistent with the relevant goals of the South Shore Estuary Reserve Comprehensive Management Plan, and would further comply with the relevant coastal policies set forth within the New York State Department of State's Coastal Management Program. Based on this information and the associated analyses in the report, we submit that there'd be no adverse effects upon coastal resources or other resiliency issues resulting from the project. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wortman. Mr. Chairman, we apologize for going over. That's unfortunately, was a lot of information here. That's why I was talking so fast at the beginning. We are here obviously to answer any questions this board may have, and any questions and comments from residents. We just respectfully ask the opportunity to respond after they will have the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. We'll go to the public hearing, the staff report, then we'll come back for questions. So we're going to go to Brian Brannigan. Once you're ready, Mr. Brannigan, just unmute. Go ahead.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the board and other members of the public. My name is Brian Brannigan. I'm the president of the Babylon Beach Estates of West Islip for the last 12 years. I've spoken at many of these hearings and represented my membership and the West Islip community. The Babylon Beach Estates Association has been in existence since 1942, which actually predates the existence of Good Samaritan Hospital. We're the only organization that has a real border with Good Samaritan Hospital, 3/4 of a mile. We're right to the west of the hospital. I think the board, the town board, has the unique opportunity to figure out a way that we could meld the building of the hospital. I speak as a town resident. I also speak as a president of the association. You might hear from some of my members that speak as a tax-paying member as well, and they have their thoughts. But West Islip has fielded a lot of the hospital's traffic and negative things, but the hospital's done a bunch of really good things. And I actually support the construction of the hospital. We need to have an up-to-date facility. We need to get new doctors, and Justin and Ruth and John and Joe. Joe's done a great job. He talks about being in the living room and watching the property from my members' point of view. But the idea that, and I want to bring your direction to something and the traffic study. We could talk about parking. We could talk about where these cars are going to park. But the gentleman decided that he was going to do a traffic study from Wagstaff and Sedecor. And I'm going to ask the board that seems to be super short-sighted. We can't pretend that Sedecor and Wagstaff, because if you go less than a block to the east, there's Robert Moses Causeway. I did the math today. From the hospital is a quarter of a mile from Robert Moses Causeway, and it's over a mile to 231. So they've decided that they're going to shut down Beach Drive as any kind of egress or entrance for their employees or visitors, which is a town road. It's run, it's maintained, and we're going to decide to push it out onto a West Drive, created West Drive, and dump all of this traffic. And now there's 2,035 cars. So where are they going? They're going to be traveling westbound through West Islip on Montauk Highway. And I appreciate that Good Samaritan, the Catholic institution, has decided to shut down Beach Drive because St. John the Baptist is having their kids come out of school at a certain amount of time. But right on Montauk Highway is the senior parking lot exit on Barberry. And all of these cars are going to facilitate westbound through West Islip, past a house of worship, past a library, through town. They could cut up Keith Lane and go south right past the brand new town park for our children. And the hospital has done a bunch of great things, and people remember the hospital for saving lives and whatnot, but there's going to be a tragedy that you're going to be pushing all of these cars in and out, a created exit to go west when we're not really realizing that right to the east is Robert Moses Causeway. And nobody has really even talked about what happens when 30 months of doing the construction, where are all these workers going? I'm not interested in the parking, but how are they accessing the site? So we can sit here and we can shut down Beach Drive and we could push all the traffic into West Islip from the west side of the property, which is a created intersection, offset. It's horrific. There's been incidents over the years coming out of there, and I'm asking you, and my members are asking you, and the West Islip community is asking you, the town, we got to figure this out. And Justin Jacon has given me direction to Michael Durso, who's the state representative, but it can't be it's the state's job because it's a state road. You guys can put signs that my members can't make a left out of East Bay Drive from 3 to 7. Can't make a left.
Brannigan, is that the end of your presentation? Okay. I don't hear Mr. Brannigan anymore, so I'm going to turn to Dave Sheehan. Mr. Sheehan, when you're ready, go ahead and unmute. You can speak.
Okay, so, I'm glad to follow Mr. Brannigan. I think he made some very good points. I live on Secretary Lane. This is a suburban residential area. This isn't Washington Heights and Columbia University Hospital. You're in the middle of neighborhoods where children play, where we already are absorbing a lot of traffic just from regular use. The traffic during the construction is going to be a nightmare. I don't know how you're going to do that with large machines and equipment coming through. The noise pollution, the carbon pollution that's going to happen because of all this increased traffic and use is not going to be good for our community. The light at Westgate that Mr. Brannigan referred to. And if you don't know this intersection, except I would guess you would, it is an offset intersection. It's already a site where people coming south on Keith and north out of West Lane don't know how to turn in front of each other because it's offset. There's an area of real kind of confusion, like who has the right of way there. When you're straight on, you can usually figure it out, and people do that weave, and they can go, aside each other. Because it's offset, it's just awful. There's going to be lots of accidents there, I fear. The other thing is, one of the things that's coming across here very strongly is size. Okay, in Miss Hennessy's presentation, two of her points had to do with we're the second largest this, we're the second largest that. Is that what we're really looking to do? Build the largest hospital we can here in the middle of a suburban neighborhood? I think this is a big mistake. I'm going to be watching with interest to see how people are voting on this. And I just hope that the committee makes the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe DiCarlo. Mr. DiCarlo, once you're ready, just unmute and go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, hi. My name is Joe DiCarlo. I'm the president of the West Islip Association, a community association that spans all of West Islip. And let me start my video. And also president of the Oak Neck Lane Association, which is the furthest east association, south association, east of the Causeway. And, I wanted to echo some of the comments that have been made so far. Basically, we're adding a 300,000 square foot addition to the hospital. And the expectation is, through the testimony so far, is that's going to really have negligible impact to traffic and the site itself in terms of the size of the building. And the concern, I guess, of the people that we've been speaking to, the people in my community and the people around the village, is that West Islip residents are very good residents. They're very reasonable residents. They love their hospital. And quite frankly, they put up with quite a bit with the hospital being in the middle of a community. And, the traffic that gets generated is a bit of a problem during the middle of the day. And, by adding this addition, we're feeling that, we're getting pretty much put upon a little bit with the size of this building. So, again, I don't want to waste a lot of time here, but really the size of the building is one of the big factors that we've heard a lot about. And also, quite frankly, the traffic. Our street, Oak Neck Lane, is it's a north-south road. It's one of the oldest north-south roads in West Islip, and going down to the bay. And we have one entrance and one exit. And I could tell you, during the middle of the day, trying to leave Oak Neck Lane, you could spend up to 10 minutes to let the traffic get, to go by. So it's a busy road to begin with, Montauk Highway. So, we'd like the board to consider all of these factors associated with the expansion of the hospital on a very, very busy road right now in terms of Montauk Highway. So, that's pretty much, the message that we'd like to send the board. And we'd like every consideration made by the board to really help the residents that surround this hospital right in the middle of really a community-oriented area. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. John Davis. Mr. Davis, once you're ready, go ahead and unmute.
Did I unmute?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
I can never find that button. I know it's supposed to be easy, but it has not been. Thank you for hearing me. John Davis, President, Willets Point Association, West Islip, P.O. Box 55. We are the next door neighbors of the Babylon Beach Association to the west of the hospital. So basically we are 2 blocks west of Good Samaritan Hospital. I've been listening carefully to the testimony tonight. We're also in complete alignment with the Babylon Beach Association and the West Islip Association on this. And we also agree that Good Samaritan Hospital, as stated in the hearing tonight, is a vital facility. And as much as we're blessed to have the hospital here, we're the ones that live with the consequences, especially those closest to it. And, you know, it's always interesting listening to traffic studies, but despite the traffic and parking studies, there are tremendous parking problems right now existing with the hospital property. They have to share the St. John's High School parking area to take the overflow away. And I really don't understand how removing over half of the front parking in front of the hospital and adding the ED to the front of the hospital is going to make those problems any better. It seems it would be making it worse. And again, I was a little bit surprised at the number of references the traffic study had to removing traffic from Beach Drive. Now, that's very nice for Beach Drive, you know, which at the north end is the St. John's High School, and the southern portion is residential areas. But that traffic's not going away. That traffic is just moving to either the center or the west side of the property. And as Brian from the Babylon Beach Association said, doing a traffic study that ends on the west side at Wagstaff Lane is missing most of it. Tremendous amount of ambulance traffic comes off of 231. I was just in Babylon Village today, and we had to force ourselves out of the way of 2 ambulances that came through at 2 different times while I was just trying to negotiate Babylon Village. So you really can't minimize the traffic issues. And I think that on that, aside from what we're hearing tonight and what you're discussing, we really need to have the New York State DOT much more involved, and the town of Islip, because all the side streets are Islip Town roads. That traffic's not going away. And that situation there, if you're familiar with it, if you happen to live in the area, is horrendous. You know, I've lived there all my life. It's certainly not getting any better. I'm sure there are other things that cause traffic there. It's not all the hospital's fault. But an awful lot more has to go into resolving these issues with particularly intersections near the hospital, Keith Lane being one. And we certainly don't want to divert traffic up Keith Lane through that residential area. So we have a lot of concerns with it. I hope that a lot more can be done with addressing those problems because, you know, it's really hard to believe that expanding the hospital with a 300,000 square foot addition is not going to increase traffic and not going to increase parking problems. So I think a lot more has to be done in those directions. We need to really protect West Islip. I mean, we're suffering the consequences of all of this. As much as we want to support and do support the hospital and need the hospital, much more has to be paid, much more attention has to be paid to that. I'll end with that. I don't need any more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Kristen Ludwig. Ms. Ludwig, you're in the room. Once you unmute, you can go ahead.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Kristen Ludwig. I live on East Bay Drive, which is right next to the hospital off Montauk Highway. There is a traffic issue on that street as well, caused from the hospital overflow. We have a lot of people. I'm not sure if you're familiar with East Bay and West Bay. It's one way in, one way out. We have a lot of cars of people that are confused with the entrances to the hospital. They come in on the one way going the wrong way. So they'll come in on East Bay in the wrong direction, heading around, trying to like loop around to West Bay. So that happens to be an issue. The thing that I would request is that we have one-way signs that are very difficult to read in difficult spots. If the town could put in more marked one-way, in, one-way out on those two streets, as well as the traffic right now happens to be horrific between those 2 points, as Mr. Brannigan and the other members of the community have stated. So that would be one thing that I would request. And also, I feel that the hospital is leaving out the first half of East Bay Drive, which is Montauk Highway down to, I would say, Center Bay and Bay First. We have no shrubbery, no coverage between the fence and the hospital. On that side, there happens to be 2 gates in and out that the hospital owns 3 residential houses on East Bay Drive. So we have a lot of traffic of people cutting through into the residential area from the hospital. There happens to be an entrance on that side, as well as the new proposed traffic pattern with the parking will increase the traffic through that cut through. There is no shrubbery. Myself and a few of the neighbors on this side are requesting that we could have some of that tall ground cover and the shrubs extended down towards Montauk Highway.
Anything further, Ms. Ludwig?
No, that would be it. Thank you.
Thank you. Roy Whalen? Once you're ready, Mr. Whalen, just unmute. You can go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you to the board for allowing me to speak tonight. And I've been part of this, and I just want to thank the Good Sam people as well, Ruth and her team. They did do an outstanding job in alerting the neighborhood or trying to get our feedback. I guess some of the issue that we have here is our own neighborhoods, because it seems like because the neighborhood directly to the east and back of St. John's, if anyone is familiar with it, is doesn't have an association. And currently we have a certain traffic issue right now. It's a cut through. It was identified on slide 10, and I forget the consulting group's name, but they alerted to it, that it goes down Snedeker, goes over to Driftwood, goes to Gate, and goes to Beach. That's a half mile. If we want to talk about the Babylon, Bay Association, because he does the miles, that's a half mile stretch of road. There's not one stop sign on that road. It passes an elementary school, and there's 5 intersections on that. So currently the speed is going 40, 50 miles an hour in our neighborhood, but I guess the associations of Willits, Oakneck Lane, and Bay don't care about that. The issue becomes, because you have so much traffic from the emergency room and continued traffic because the Constellation and the new cancer center as well going back there, and the marina, and St. John the Baptist. What was said before is untrue, because all they said was the senior exit. All the buses exit from St. John's on the Beach Drive. But the association members never cite that. That's the issues that you have too. We are living this hell today. This has nothing to do with the expansion. It's only going to get worse, the expansion, unless the town of Iceland. I just want to cite as well, I talked to Angie Carpenter before she got reelected. She said she was going to look into it. Nothing was done. After the last Good Sam meeting, Mr. Ron Meyer said that he was very familiar with the traffic study was done. It was very comprehensive, and I challenged him whether it was on the comprehensive on the east, the neighborhood to the east of Good Sam, and there was really no answer. The issue, the fact of the matter is we're living with a hell today, and I do applaud the Good Sam people, Ruth and the team, for reaching out to us. And the other issue too is it was just addressed quickly. In spite of all this, you have a parking that's a privilege. It was identified as a privilege to the employees, not an overflow, a privilege to the employees to park in the St. John's parking lot. When they allowed that, Town of Islip put up 2 walkways, lighted walkways on Beach Street, Beach Drive. At the end of each light, and it was said even by Angie Carpenter when I spoke to her that it was because of students working at the hospital. I have not seen one student on that crosswalk. What I have seen is people smoking at the end of the crosswalk, which doesn't send any great message to our students as well. At the end of the day, I agree with the fact that something has to be done with the traffic. But whether you're an association or not, shouldn't dismiss the fact that the neighborhood to the east is really in dire straits right now of someone looking at the problem and the issues of the traffic and the speeds of the traffic going through our neighborhoods to appease right now the employees going into Good Sam. And I applauded Good Sam in the fact that they're trying to remedy this through the closures of the Beach Drive. And the Bay Association has no issue with that. At the end of the day, no one enters other than, the random people going in because they're lost on the entrance. You can still make a right from Bay and go to Robert Mosley exit. I don't know what the point of is saying all this traffic's going through the West Islip area. But the issue is we are living the hell currently, and there's no remedy to it whatsoever. And there's one other issue I'll just bring, and I really thank you for my time here, and hopefully I haven't gone over. I really haven't been timing myself. The other issue too is there's a map that was shown from Good Sam showing that they have all these zones of people that all throughout all throughout the Islips and everything else that they accommodate. I argue the town of Islip has to ask the question of Good Sam, what percentage is all of Islip? Because other than West Islip, the only ambulances I see are all town of Babylon, Amityville, Copeg, West Babylon, North Babylon. And here we're being interfered with as a good town of Islip paying taxpayer to appease people in Babylon. Of course, I'm not going to stop that from happening. Of course, they need, it's unfortunate that Babylon doesn't have their own hospital. But at the end of the day, majority of these people are coming from Babylon and are being treated at the Good Sam Medical Center. So I just want to get the truth out there, and a comprehensive traffic study, as you could tell. I think that we're all in agreement that incorporates all the surrounding areas and not just, the West Side Drive, which I do think is a very good remedy myself. Thank you for your time. I do appreciate it. If I've gone over, I do apologize for that. And just to let you know, I've been living in West Islip for 60 of my 64 years. I was born in 56, so I'm older than the hospital as well. So,
Thank you, Mr. Whalen. Those are all the speakers I have signed up for this evening. Did I miss anyone? Raise your hand now if I did. Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As stated by the applicant, this application proposes an approximate 300,000 square foot, 6-story addition to the existing Good Samaritan Hospital in order to expand and modernize its patient care pavilion. The building as proposed will meet the minimum setbacks, as it is required to be set back from the street as far as it is tall. The hospital will replace the parking stalls displaced by the expansion towards the rear of the property. The employees and visitors parking in the rear will be reliant on a shuttle service to bring them back and forth to the hospital. The town's traffic consultant has reviewed the site plan and the traffic study. That review indicated that the site plan has been designed to encourage more vehicles to access Montauk Highway via the signalized access point opposite Keith Lane, and will also help distribute hospital traffic more evenly among the 3 Montauk Highway intersections to minimize delays and enhance the safe operations of the facility. While some congestion and delay will continue to occur, the proposed configuration is expected to provide safe and reasonable access to the expanded facility. Lastly, the applicant has submitted a construction traffic and parking management plan. As per the town's traffic consultant, it appears to provide a reasonable framework. However, the management will require effective coordination among the applicant, New York State DOT, and the town. We did hear a number of comments from the public tonight, so the staff would recommend that the board reserve decision in order to review those further.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Questions from the board? I'm going to go to Mr. Bruno first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask, and I guess it's also as part of the parking question. There's 2 floors on the upper part of the building that have not been given a use yet. I'm wondering what is I understand you would want to build for expansion. I get that. I'm just wondering what you think they might be. And looking at the parking counts, I'm not sure, Mr. Winkleman, maybe you can answer that for me. I know you're over on the parking, but did you account for that, or how are we dealing with that too? I'm going to call it the 2 vacant upper floors.
So I'll start with that question. This is John Anzalone. Just to respect to the use of the top floors, they will be used for the development of 72 single patient bedrooms, so 36 on each floor. That is the use. It's just not being built out. And when the Kristen Pavilion is opened, it will eventually be built as single patient bedrooms. And if you could speak to the traffic issues that were just raised, I mean the parking count, I should say, associated with that.
Sanslin, just to clarify that, would those be additional beds, or would those be breaking down double rooms into single rooms if you were expanded to the top 2 floors?
Breaking down double rooms into single rooms. There's no additional beds.
That would be for the top 2 floors if that was built out as well? Okay.
Yes, which in turn allows us to create the broken down beds become single beds as well.
Okay.
Yes, so to answer your question, Mr. Bruno, the traffic study did account for the full occupancy of the building, but like Mr. Loyo kind of said, there is no net increase in the number of beds. It's essentially the right sizing of the hospital to accommodate single rooms.
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Bruno? No. Further questions from the board? Ms. Cruz?
Yeah, I did hear from one of the residents as far as using the Robert Moses Causeway. That was not included, right? And why not? Because it seemed to not kind of include the traffic study coming from there.
So in terms of the traffic study, the scope of the study was coordinated with the New York State DOT, the town's traffic staff. We looked at the limits of the traffic study up to that point, and because it has a clover leaf system, there is no traffic signal at that intersection. There's no stop signs at that intersection that would incur any type of significant delay. And that's mainly because, like we've mentioned, this is a right sizing of the building to accommodate new program requirements from the Department of Health. It's not going to generate significant amounts of traffic. We're talking about 2 additional trips during the peak periods. And when you distribute that to the entire roadway network, going out from the site, traffic gets more and more dispersed. So once we reach that point, the number of trips that we're adding to those areas are minimal and won't significantly impact conditions whatsoever. Like I said, the New York State DOT has jurisdiction over that interchange. And if they felt that there would be an impact, they certainly would have included it in our scope.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Winkleman, do you know percentage-wise what amount of traffic heads east out of the hospital and what percentage of the traffic heads west out of the hospital from your traffic study?
There is a heavier movement to the east. I have to do the exact percentage calculations, but I would assume 60% go to the east and 40% go to the west.
Okay, and do you anticipate any change in that calculation based upon the change in Beach Drive and the new entrance that'll be used for the emergency room?
No, it would follow the same pattern. The number of trips is going to be the number of increased trips is going to be very minimal. Less than 2 a minute during peak periods. So if you look at it, even though it's a 60-40 split, we're still saying, during a change in the signal, like if we look at a signal and it cycles every minute and a half, say, we're going to only add 2 trips to that signal. So one would go left and one would go right. So when you look at it that way, it's really not going to be any significant change in how much traffic goes in each direction. Whether it's a 60-40 split or a 50-50 split, it's not going to be anything you can really.
The queuing heading west to turn into what'll become the new main entrance, I guess, to go into the emergency room. How many cars can be held in that queue to make a left-hand turn in? I haven't seen the state part of the study. Will there be a signalized left turn arrow there as well?
So the premise behind the study, and when we were working with the town and in the New York State DOT, was in an effort to balance the traffic between all of the different access points from east to west. So now instead of a lot of traffic using the Beach Drive left turn lane, now we've essentially balanced the traffic using each of the left turn lanes to enter the easterly driveway, the westerly driveway, and still on Beach Lane. The way the traffic enters the site is not going to change very much. We're taking the ED traffic and we're essentially pushing it to the easterly driveway along Montauk Highway. That's the big change in the traffic pattern. And we did queuing analysis to see how long the queues were to ensure that the left turn lanes would be long enough to accommodate the additional demand, and they can.
How many cars does the queuing lane hold now for that?
For the
easterly.
Let me bring up the aerial here so I can make sure I have the correct location for you. So if we're talking about turn lane right now, that's correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yep, correct.
Yeah, it's approximately 5 vehicles can be stored in that turn lane right now.
And your traffic study suggests that that'll remain the same?
It would increase, but it would still be able to accommodate the capacity. So it would increase probably approximately 1 car length during peak times.
So just to try and understand this, I'm assuming that the premise of only 1 or 2 trips per minute, or would be increased?
Two trips per minute, essentially. Yep.
How many cars were actually turning heading from out east, we're heading down Beach Drive that you're now pushing to the other intersection, or not intersection, the other entrance?
So currently, we'll look at the AM peak period, which is the heaviest inbound period. There's 60 vehicles in an hour going into that location. And let me get the proposed numbers for you. It's essentially, it's going to decrease, actually, and more traffic will use the westerly driveway because that is the employee entrance. So more employees are going to use this lane now.
So, do you have a breakdown of your emergency room? And again, you can take these as questions and submit them after the meeting if you don't have the answers in front of you. But do you have a breakdown as to what percentage of the employees that use Beach Drive were employees versus emergency room use? Do you know how many daily trips to the emergency room by vehicle were down Beach Drive?
We have, we have estimates of the number of vehicles that go to the emergency room. And I say that because your emergency room, generally they come into this location here,
right,
and then they filter into the parking area. Not everyone does that. Some still directly enter into Beach Drive and then they walk to the emergency room. So we do have the number of vehicles that we believe is an estimate that was outlined in the traffic study. And we took those volumes and we redistributed them to this location. But because we're removing a lot of staff that actually park in this northerly area, and we are parking them in the areas in the south part of the campus, we're changing the traffic patterns, which is why we're actually seeing a slight decrease here, an increase here during that AM period. And that was by design. We wanted to balance the traffic volumes, but we also wanted to direct traffic to a traffic signal where people could make their moves under the protection of a traffic signal, which is what we have at the westerly access.
And is there any discussion with the state about a turning signal to the other, or any signal at the other entrance, or no?
In this location?
Yes.
No, there was no discussion or requirement for a traffic signal at that location. The volumes are too low to actually warrant a traffic signal. We did look at it. We looked at multiple access scenarios, and it was very difficult because the site's frontage is so narrow, and there are you have an opposing street and an opposing use with another driveway in this location. So we did have discussions with the New York State DOT, and the access agreement that the access scenario that we've come up with was the preferred scenario from them.
And in terms of the increased amount of cars making the right into that entrance now, the new emergency entrance that would have gone down Beach Drive, what is the increase there?
Instead of if a nurse was coming from the west and they were going to the emergency room, they would have continued past this access and made the right. So there is going to be no change there. They're simply going to make the right-hand turn in there, or they may use the westerly drive because it's actually going to be more convenient.
Yeah, my concern or question would be as they're making the right in, the car's waiting to make a left, obviously, of a car now that's slowing down to make the right versus driving by, what the increase would be into that intersection, if you know it, into that entrance.
I don't think there'll be any measurable increase.
Okay, and then while we're on, you have that up there, the Keith Lane entrance, and I've been there plenty of times. I've born and raised in West Islip, not as many years as Mr. Whalen, but getting closely approaching that. But that does tend to be somewhat problematic in terms of people are confused as to what to do when it's off-centered. Was that at all looked at or discussed as part of the traffic study?
Yes, it was looked at. I understand, the issues in terms of the confusion. There's the left turn and people are still continuing forward. We did look at different phasing options, but there was nothing that, without correcting the geometry, nothing was going to be able to remedy any of these issues. They're generally driver error, just people not understanding the geometry as you approach the intersection. We have already pushed the access as far to the west as we possibly can. There is no other ability to push it further to align it, unfortunately. So the way it's phased is the most appropriate. If we were to change the phasing in this area to change the approaches in how they access the intersection, the delay at this intersection would, to put it in simple terms, go through the roof, because we would be adding another phase to that intersection. So the delays and the queues would expand quite a bit.
I mean, something that I'll probably drill down into after the meeting and maybe submit some questions for Mr. Colgan, really just trying to understand. I know we keep saying the traffic counts are going to decrease or not really increase. I'm just still not sure where they're all going to if we're decreasing. The people still are getting into the facility, right?
We're just decreasing at certain locations and increasing at others. So this location, essentially this location and this location receive the bulk of the traffic. The traffic at this intersection and this intersection is being balanced by adding it in this location.
So how many additional trips are being added to that location?
1 second.
Again, if you don't have it handy, you can certainly submit this afterwards to Mr. Colgan. I can review it then.
Yeah, I will certainly submit that afterwards.
That'd be fine. So I just really want to get a better understanding. The main concern this evening certainly was traffic. I think the easterly, westerly question you've answered for me, but just I'd like to see where they're being pushed to, the cars that are coming in and out, and what impact that'll have would be my concern there.
Understood.
And since you brought up, Ben, I think it was brought up by Ms. Ludwig, and I'm familiar with what she's talking about. I know you said you've pushed that entrance lane as far west as possible. As a result of that, there is very little landscaping that's, I guess, on the hospital side up against those properties on the northerly part of the Good Samaritan property on the west side. And maybe for the hospital or for someone, is there something that can be done to increase landscaping or something along that northerly part of the property?
I can answer that, certainly can, yes,
Okay, that'd be great if you could certainly look into that for us.
absolutely.
I want to turn to other board members. I thought Mr. Moriarty, did you have a question earlier?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. It's a design question for the applicant. Could someone explain to me, location of HVA systems, mechanicals, and the like? Are those going to, I assume they're rooftop, are they going to be out exposed to the public, or are those going to be shielded, or how's that being handled?
Yeah, I can answer that. The first floor of the building is the emergency room. The second floor are the operating rooms. The third floor of the building is what we call an interstitial space. So that is a mechanical floor. So all of the mechanical equipment is located inside the floor. If you recall the renderings, the rooftops are pretty much smooth, right? There's no ductwork, there's no chillers or anything like that on the rooftops. There will be some fan exhausts that you can't see from the road. And the purpose of that is to provide a clean aesthetic look to the hospital, to the building, but also to, frankly, it cuts the cost somewhat because we don't have to run ductwork and wires and runs from a roof all the way down to the first floor. So the direct answer to your question is all of the mechanical equipment is located indoors in this interstitial mechanical floor.
Thank you. That's good to hear. In all honesty, if you look at some of the south side buildings that have been going up and have gone up, a lot of significant mechanicals are out in public display. It doesn't.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know.
It's a very unattractive look, to say the least. So that's good. It's good to hear that you've integrated those in buildings. Thank you.
There we go. Mr. Matamore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question has to do with the emergency department. I think it's referred to, or emergency room, which we know has recently, or in the recent past, been down on Beach Road, about halfway down to the bay. And now it's going to move to this new facility up in the northeast corner in the new facility. What is planned for that facility that the emergency department is leaving? Is that the substantial space, and will that continue to access in and out of Beach Road at its current location for some other purpose?
So the current emergency room will be repurposed for a couple of different things. First, we plan to relocate. Well, the overall plan for the vacant facilities is to A, create more private patient rooms, and B, add needed storage space that we have here at the hospital. But the emergency room itself would be a waste just to use it for storage. So what we're planning to use it for is what we call observation level of care. So these are patients who've come to the emergency room and a decision whether to admit or not hasn't been made by the doctors yet. So, and typically these patients stay for less than 24 hours, sometimes as soon as 3 or 4 or 5 hours. But while those decisions are being made, the patient is under, quote, observation, we would move them to the old emergency room. Nobody's really going to access the emergency room from outside the hospital. These patients are moved internally, and that's where they wait until a decision is made. And when a decision to admit is made, those patients are moved to an inpatient bed. Currently, we care for somewhere around 14 to 25 observation level of patients a day or at any one time. And those patients are largely left in the emergency room, which causes overcrowding and is for a lot of different reasons is just bad. I mean, it's a bad patient experience. It's uncomfortable. It's noisy, so we wouldn't. Or sometimes they're moved to a patient bed, which occupies a patient bed with a patient that isn't even admitted to the hospital. So that's what we plan to use that space for. We plan to use the vacated operating rooms to modernize our neonatal intensive care unit. which is on the same floor as the mother-baby unit. So we'll be able to just create larger rooms. You know, just want to clarify something in no uncertain terms. This is a physical expansion of the hospital facility, not a programmatic expansion. So we're not adding any extra beds. Our emergency room right now, we have, between the pediatric emergency room and the adult emergency room, we have 59 patient treatment bays. If anyone's been to our emergency room, you'll know that that room gets overcrowded, and we double up those emergency room bays on a regular basis, which is not conforming with regulations and regular treatment protocols. And the patients have maybe 30 square feet of space. So the new emergency room will have, and those patients are commingled or intermingled, and we try to avoid this, but intermingled with patients who are problematic, who have behavior issues, or patients with behavioral health problems, which we're beginning to see a lot of across all communities. The new emergency room will have 75 patient bays, which will alleviate virtually all of our overcrowding, which will allow the patients about 150 square feet of space. Chad, check that. It's either 150 or 120 square feet of space, which conforms with New York State regulations for, and they're all private rooms, right, with glass doors in front of them. And we're able to have separate spaces in this emergency room to accommodate pediatric patients, behavioral health patients, and trauma patients, right? So they're not commingled the way they are now. We've also been able to add, which is impossible in our emergency room now, lessons that we learned from COVID. We have 2 areas in this emergency room with 17 treatment bays each that we can isolate. And I don't mean isolate by closing a door. I mean isolate by adjusting the ventilation system there to make a negative pressure ventilation in that section of the emergency room, in case, God forbid, we end up with another pandemic like we just went through. All of these innovations are possible with a physical expansion. That's why our studies have shown that even though we're expanding in 300,000 square foot buildings, sounds outrageous, but that's what it takes to provide basically the same level of patient care that we're providing now. We've looked at our emergency room visits. Actually, we've looked at emergency room visits, utilization, and demographics across all of Long Island. And for the last 10 years, pretty much steadily, there have been about 550 emergency room visits in all of Long Island. That number has been steady. We have no reason to believe that we're going to experience an additional number of emergency room visits. We're just going to be able to house them better. In the operating rooms, our current operating rooms, we have 12 operating rooms now. Those operating rooms run late into the night, almost 7 days a week, partially because each one of those rooms is way undersized. Typically, a modern operating room is 650, at least 650 square feet. Our existing operating rooms range in size from 350 to 425 square feet. With the number of personnel and the amount of equipment that it takes to perform modern surgeries, you know, that I know that our community deserves, not just the extended community, but our immediate community in West Island, like open heart surgery, valve transplants, neurologic interventions, things like that. These require much bigger rooms. So while we are adding 4 rooms, these rooms are 650 to 850 square feet, which will allow us to provide the technology necessary to provide those cases. The additional 4 rooms will have a few more surgeries, but what we'll be able to do is have a lot more flexibility to do specialty high-tech surgeries in a lot more of the rooms that we have, which will alleviate our patients and physicians and doctors of having to do pretty much routine surgeries at 1 o'clock in the morning. And we can normalize the day that way. So just really to point out, this is not a programmatic expansion. That we did not apply for additional beds from the Department of Health, nor did the Department of Health grant or recommend that we added more beds. But what they did demand was that we added private beds, so single patient rooms. And that's what the plan calls for, is single patient rooms. In fact, we're not even allowed with CMS, that's set Medicare, Medicaid, and the Department of Health, we're not even allowed to build double patient rooms anymore. No one across the country is allowed to build double patient, shared patient rooms, or, you know, some of the old days where you had 4 patients in a room. I'd also like, just quickly, while I have the floor, to take the opportunity to thank Brian and Roy and others for the kind words. I know we've spent a lot of time together over the last couple of years. I understand some of the things you're talking about, and you know, we've been able to take a lot of your suggestions and incorporate them into this very important project. And Kristen, you'll hear from me, and we'll get you some of those mature growth trees, as I say, in order to shield that, screen that buffer along the, frankly, I didn't even think about it. But I will now. So thank you very much for that suggestion. That's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Colgan, I know you mentioned the construction, traffic, and parking management plan. You're satisfied as a framework, you said, and you'll be coordinating, or the town will be coordinating with everyone on that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the traffic consultant believes it's a good start. We haven't formally vetted that with the Division of Traffic Safety, and to my knowledge, nor the Department of Transportation. So moving forward, we'll make sure that's, you know, to their likings, and if this project gets approved, that will, you know, likely be a covenant that the staff recommends.
Okay, so yeah, so the board will look for something back from you on that. And the last thing I was just going to ask you is the one-way signs that were mentioned, if that's something that you can look into on those 2 streets.
Yep, that would be under the, you know, the direction of traffic safety. So we'll certainly speak with those members within the coming weeks to address that.
Thank you. And then just one last question for the hospital. I know you said the state will not permit the construction of double patient rooms. The rooms that are going from double to single, what keeps you from, after putting them to single, putting 2 people back into those? Are they now considered single and are not permitted to go back to double?
Well, first of all, we won't have a licensed bed in order to use that room. Secondly, it's a matter of patient preference.
Can you apply for a license? I'm sorry, can you apply for a licensed bed or no?
Yeah, we can always apply for a license to increase our licensed beds, but right, we haven't done that because we don't see a need to do it. Right. You know, the standard of care now is in a private patient room. And by the way, one of the ways that we can reduce the overcrowding in the emergency room, what typically happens in an emergency room is we get patients that get admitted to the emergency room, but we can't discharge patients fast enough in order to bring the patients that are in the emergency room up to the patient floors, right? So then we wind up with a backlog in the emergency room. By having shared patient rooms, we have cohorted patients in different rooms. So you got a male room, a room with a male in it. You can't put a female in there. So depending on the type of patient waiting for a room, there may be an infection, there may be a certain type of condition, or there may be just simply a male-female that many beds go unused. So with single patient rooms, it actually makes the throughput that much more efficient. So which is one of the reasons why that infection control, privacy, things like that, patient satisfaction, all go into it. So, you know, nobody's really going to double patient rooms anymore. It's just not the standard.
So you'd be okay with some type of condition that doesn't allow you to request to go back to double patient rooms, and those that are already approved as double patient rooms, already constructed as a double patient room?
Yeah.
Okay. Those are, I mean, all the questions I have. Obviously, I'll wait to get back some of the traffic information that we asked for, but that's it in terms of questions that I have. Is there anything further from the board? Would the applicant like to add anything further?
So we would certainly like to thank this board and the residents for coming out tonight, for hearing our presentation and for allowing us to respond to them and to respond to you. We would like to submit a conclusion that there are several bases supporting this application. The property is an existing hospital that has existed for over 60 years, and the patient care pavilion improvements will allow it to attract more quality doctors and surgeons, and as Joe and others noted, just provide the same services in a more appropriately sized setting for those services. The project has been designed to meet all bulk area requirements and only requires a few landscape variances that I won't regurgitate. And further, the building is located as far away from the residents as possible. And finally, the development will allow for the provision of state-of-the-art care in a more less densely built emergency department, modern operating rooms, and a more comfortable, private, safe, and relaxing recovery setting for hospital patients. As such, we respectfully request this board to grant the site plan waivers and recommend approval of the application, obviously after we get the information that this board needs from traffic to make an informed decision.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation this evening. Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty.
Yeah, I would move to close the hearing this evening and reserve decision, allowing time for planning staff and the applicant to work out these issues and follow up with the additional information requested.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and reserve decision this evening. Mr. Matamore, is that a second? Second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I note for the record that Mr. Frugieri has recused on this matter. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have one shot.
And if I can. So the last matter this evening is major subdivision bond extension, Fox Run Estates, East Islip, MS 2006-001, west side of Suffolk Lane, approximately 620 feet south, Hayden Place, East Islip. Applicant requests the acceptance of the continuation certificate for bond number B100278330 in connection with this major subdivision. Good evening, Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was last heard on July 15th, 2020, where the board accepted a continuation certificate for the original surety bond on file. All homes have been CO'd and the infrastructure of utilities, the road, etc., have been installed. The applicant is currently in contact with the town's deputy attorney regarding an easement and water main issue that they're going to resolve. As stated in the prior meeting, the road will not be done weathering the required time until the end of this summer, 2021. Therefore, this new continuation certificate, which runs from July 22nd, 2021 to July 21st of 2022, will provide the necessary coverage to have the applicant dedicate the road afterwards. Based on this, staff recommends the board accept the continuation certificate for bond number B100278330 in the amount of $407,861, subject to the attached final resolution last dated August 16th, 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Any questions for Mr. Gonzalez? Not seeing any. Is there a motion?
Chairman?
Mr. Frugieri.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept the bond continuance.
Motion by Mr. Frugieri to accept the bond continuance. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? It's approved.
Aye.
Is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
By Mr. Bruno to adjourn, second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Do you realize what that guy said about the size of those